Okay, thank you. Well, we've been speaking on the theme of life, love, and the purpose or meaning of our existence. And for this second presentation, let me begin by reading to you from the prologue of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. That prologue of the Gospel of John used to be read at every Mass when I was a boy, you know, in the old rite. And in talking about life, existence, that's pretty much where you have to start. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So from all eternity, God is, as we said before. That is life itself. God's very essence is to exist. That's where all life, all being, all existence comes from God. To the degree that we are in God, one with God, to that degree, we have life, authentic life. To the degree that we are not with God, in God, living through him, with him, and in him, we don't have life. From that it follows that there are a very large number of people who are dead right now. Not physically dead yet, but dead. Dead, D-double-D-E-A-D, dead. Why? The life of grace has been extinguished in their soul. And that's really death. St. Paul talks about the second death. We have a physical death, but what he's talking about is the loss of eternal salvation. It's a frightening thing, and I think people like to humor themselves with the fuzzy thought that, well, God is so good that he really couldn't allow anybody to be lost. Wrong. Wrong. There is heaven and there is hell. And those are the only two ultimate destinations for a human being. Purgatory is part of the doctrine of the faith, but it's a brief stop on the way to heaven. If you've made it to purgatory, you've made it. You're going to heaven. So, you know, that's why it always baffles me. And it's happened more than once. Sometimes even Catholics will say to me, oh, I don't believe in purgatory. I say, why would you boast about the thing that makes you a heretic? That's part of the doctrine of the faith. Well, I don't believe. Who cares? So what? You don't believe in it? What? You know more than the church? When it comes to the teaching of the church, somebody gets the vague notion, well, I don't really believe that. Well, then you don't have faith. So get some in a hurry. Heaven or hell, that's it. That message doesn't play well today. We don't like that kind of a stark message in the 21st century. I can't change it. It is what it is. Now, I know that even in this nice big room full of good people, there are some of us who are delaying our real conversion. There are some of us here right now that haven't really made the final decision. You're kind of putting it off. Now, you can't hide. You can run, but you can't hide. I don't know who you are, but God does. So, you know who you are, and if you need to go to confession, this is the time, soon, like within the next week. Okay, if you can't do it today, within the next week, if you are conscious of serious sin, mortal sin, don't put it off. You know not the day or the hour. Next Tuesday, whether you're 8 or 80, could be the last day of your life. I don't know when it is. You don't know when it is. God knows when it is. Don't assume. My high school chemistry professor, that's the first thing he did. He wrote his name on the blackboard, first day of class. I've often talked about this, but Mr. James Stiles, he wrote it on the blackboard, James Stiles. And the second thing he did after he introduced himself was he wrote the word assume on the blackboard. A-S-S-U-M-E. He said, don't assume. And then he took the chalk and he put a slash after the second S. Don't assume. You make an ASS out of you and me. Don't assume. Don't assume you're going to have more time. Don't assume that next week will be business as usual. Take care of business. Do it right now. Take care of life, love, and you'll be taking care of the purpose of our existence. Life and love are intertwined. They are one. You can't really live without love. I used to give spiritual conferences and retreats for nuns, often contemplative nuns, Discounts, Carmelites, and so forth. And I often, one of the conferences I would give to the sisters, it would be on love and on relationships. Now, most people are called to be married. That's just the way it is. The vast majority of human beings are called to the married state. And in the interchange of love between husband and wife, you find your fulfillment. This is a basic thing, a primordial thing, but even religious who have a vow of a virginity or celibacy, you have to have an outlet for love. And if you do not, your existence will be impoverished and unfulfilled. If you are a single layperson, likewise, you cannot remain without a way to express your love. And of course, for the religious sister, her vow, they consider Jesus their spouse, the bridegroom. You know, in Scripture, Jesus is referred to as the bridegroom, and the bride is the church. So the sisters have that outlet. They do everything for Jesus, that he's the spouse in a spiritual way. Priests. And you know that I've never heard this. It exists. Others have said it. I didn't make it up. But it is rarely talked about today. You know, if a young man approaching the priesthood doesn't understand that he has to have an outlet and an objective for his love, because that's natural. Without love, you wither up and die. You have to be able to express love. And if you don't know how to do that in an appropriate manner, you're apt to start doing it sooner or later in an inappropriate manner. And that happens. By the way, let me use this as an occasion to just exhort you in a certain way. Do not be among those people who are so shocked and so scandalized when one of us messes up. Now, I know that it's a bad thing, and I agree that it's worse when a priest does it. You know what I'm talking about, the scandals that we have. And not just in that form. There are all kinds of ways that a priest can not live appropriately in accordance with his state in life. But if they don't understand that they too are called to love, sooner or later they're going to fall in. And I'm going to tell you something that's way more common than you think. Way more common than you think. In one form or another, disordered behavior is going to happen. 90% never get caught. And I'm not just talking about sexual things either. There's going to be something. A very large number of priests were alcoholics in the old days. 8 of 10 in my area were, where I grew up. I've been with priests in the last 20 years, parish missions and so forth. And I guess this amazed me, although nothing amazes me anymore. And it shouldn't. Why should it? I mean, after where I've been, why should anything amaze me? I remember I was at a parish on the East Coast, and I had just given my personal testimony, my life story. And after we were in a church hall, having some coffee or whatever, and I was talking to some people, I was talking to an elderly priest. He was pretty old. He was a lot older than me. And he said, "Father, we have something in common." And then some other people came, and in order to finish his sentence, he switched to speaking in Italian. Or it could have been Spanish just as easily, but we're talking in English. Yeah, we have something in common. And some people came, and I said, "Oh, what's that, Father? La cocaina." Cocaine. And I said, "Oh, when you were young, you got into that mess too?" He said, "No, not when I was young, right now." And he was in his 70s. While I was there, we found out that he had signed for like a Cadillac or something for the biggest drug dealer in town. The police had come to the rectory. They tried to get him help. He was a very nice man, and the people had the highest regard for them. They said he was the best person in the confessional any of them had ever encountered. Why? Because he understood. Because he understood human weakness. I am not making light of scandal or sin. I'm not. I call good and evil by their proper name, and I try to do that. But please do not be one of those superficial people that feigns shock and gets angry because some priest screws up. In plain English, grow up. I watched that spectacle unfold just like you do several years ago, and it went on forever and ever. And it aggravates me. Am I dismissing it? Am I saying, "Oh, it's nothing"? Nope, it's terrible. I agree. It's awful. Don't be surprised. Don't be shocked. When a man gets ordained, he receives certain sacramental power, but he remains a man. Nothing else changes, believe me. I looked at women all my life, till I was 37 years old, 44 years, I got ordained, okay? I remember a story Bishop Sheen told once. A really nice-looking girl walked by, and he looked at her, and another woman was there and said, "Why, Bishop, you're not supposed to look at girls." And he said, when we take a vow of celibacy, we don't become blind. Now, admittedly, they shouldn't be looking, you know, in a certain way. No. Don't put priests in a category where they don't belong. Respect them? Yes. Do they have sacramental power? Yes. But please always remember, they're men. They can make mistakes. They can fall on their face. You know how it is in the world today. You know, I have, someday you may read about me. Now, I'm not doing anything, you know, that's so horrible, but man, they've been trying to catch me at it for years. I came home from a trip to Florida this winter, and I was working on my book. I'm working on my autobiography, which, by the way, is a very hard enterprise. I'm having a tough time with it. I have to go back and I have to dredge up all that stuff, and much of it is not at all pleasant. I went back to Hollywood and Los Angeles. I went and visited the first home that I lived in, my office. In writing that, you know, I had to kind of relive it. It's not pleasant. I came home from that trip, and I was taking some groceries out of my car. And now I live in Montana, and my land is kind of half woods, half open pasture. And like an old hunter or an old soldier, out of the corner of my eye, something didn't look right in the woods. And I got a really bad feeling. And of course, trusting God, believing that I have a guardian angel, which I certainly do, nonetheless believing that we have to do our part, I reached into the glove compartment and took out the nice Kimber custom-made .45 semi-automatic pistol. And as we are taught to do in the military, engaged the threat by running as fast as I could directly at it, whereupon a man hiding behind a tree fell over backwards with a camera with a telephoto lens this big. Now, I get death threats every 2-3 months and have for years, most of which are probably meaningless, no big deal. But a friend of mine in the FBI once told me, we take everyone seriously. You should too, because it only takes one. And they don't have to be a professional assassin. They can just be an emotionally disturbed person. And that's all it takes. So I didn't know. So I politely interrogated him. He was a private investigator hired by someone who didn't like me. And he got some pictures of me too. The worst ones were taking my 3 dogs outside the house to go to the bathroom one afternoon. That's the best he could do. Nonetheless, think about it. Night and day in, day out, you're a target. Now, last summer, I was accused of being a homosexual person 4 times. And I was accused of having various and sundry mistresses and girlfriends 6 times, all in one summer. I was busy. Why was I accused of those things? Well, someone had seen me, God forbid, having dinner with some friends of mine who happened to be men. He must be gay. I was in Costco one day. I had had dinner on a Saturday evening, I think Monday or Tuesday. I'm in Costco buying groceries. One of the girls who was a waitress in that restaurant came up and, oh, I saw you in the restaurant Saturday night, blah, blah, blah. You know, the girls and I were talking. We see you come in every once in a while. You know, we never see you with women. We were just wondering, are you gay? And I wanted to say, are you crazy? I mean, not... why would you make a statement like that? I mean, what did I do? Yeah. Well, we were just wondering, you know. I play golf. My golf partner is a woman. One of my good friends who works for me in the off-season is an LPGA golfer. She's a golf pro. She teaches at the country club golf, and she plays in tournament. Good friend of mine. She works with us in the off-season. You know, sometimes I'll have lunch with her, play golf, whatever. It's got to be my girlfriend, right? So if I'm seen with a man, must be. If I'm seen with a woman, oh yeah. I don't have any children friends, luckily. I live with 2 Chesapeake Bay Retrievers and a German wire hair pointer, and I wonder what they think about that. Like my grandma used to say, you can't win for losing. So I can't be seen with a man, I can't be seen with a woman, and I can't be seen with a child. Where does that leave me? Right where the devil wants me, alone. And we've contributed to that. We're paranoid. Don't do it. If a priest makes a mistake, it's not a good thing, it's a horrible thing. I'm not dismissing it. But do not add fuel to the fire. Love him. Because if you don't, you're going to end up with nothing. In plain English. Local pastor mysteriously was removed in the last few weeks. Where I live, he was a very good man. I don't know what happened, honestly. You know, you always imagine. You know, you can guess. I don't know. All I know is it's sad. That's all I know. It's sad whenever it happens. When all that mess went on, I was upset too. You know, I remember going through an airport and an older lady kind of confronted me, and actually she grabbed me right by the jacket, right like that. She said, "I'm mad at you, priest." You're mad. I'm madder than hell. You don't have to dress like this in public. When I got into this, it was perfectly respectable. Now people want to spit on us. And we're not all that way. Very few priests did the things that a few priests, they did. And it's wrong. It's horrible. Part of humanity. Part of love. You first must love God. How? With your whole heart, with your whole mind, and with your whole strength. Then, and only then, will you be enabled and capacitated to love your neighbor as yourself out of love for God. There may be people that aren't lovable, and that's a fact. You know, let's not beat around the bush. There are some people that you find hard to love. Me too. Ah, I struggle with it, absolutely. Remember we mentioned about definitions? Don't be confused about definitions, especially with love. I don't really have to like everybody. I have to love everybody. And the love we're talking about is agape love, Christian love, self-sacrificing love. That love which sees Jesus in every human being. Now, the person may be despicable. The person may be a horrible example of humanity. They may be a criminal, hurting themselves, hurting other people, destroying their own human dignity. I have to love them, but I find them repulsive and totally aggravating. You know, they drive me crazy. I have a couple relatives like that. God, I don't like them. But I have to love them. Now, what do I mean by that? Okay, I don't have to demonstrate some warm, fuzzy, emotional response. Now, I have to be civil. And I have to try to avoid the near occasion of sin, which means being anywhere near them sometimes. But I have to love them. What does that mean? It means that I have to desire their eternal salvation, and I have to be willing to do something about it. Now, you may have a relative, a friend, a co-worker, a neighbor, a priest that does something very offensive. They do something to harm you. You know, this is the thing that I kind of always wondered about with the abuse cases, which I do not, by the way, in any, don't get me wrong, I don't tolerate that or think it's okay. I'm not soft on that. I happen to know a couple of the priests who got in trouble. One of them I know very well. Matter of fact, he's a priest that helped me get started in preaching. When he was a young priest in his 20s, and this was a long time ago, 40, 45 years ago maybe, I think his first assignment was at a Catholic girls' college. And he was a good-looking, big, athletic man, and he he had it not going for him that he was kind of Latin descent, which, you know, that a certain genetic predisposition that made it difficult for him to look the other way when he should have. He got in trouble with a girl. She was 17. It was wrong. It was wrong, very wrong. He shouldn't have done that. It was a sin, serious sin. He felt terrible. He went to confession. He went to the bishop. He told him. And it never happened again for 35 years. And he had an exemplary, powerful ministry. Then when all the scandals erupted, some of the victims got one law firm, and they subpoenaed the records of the diocese for 100 years. 100 years. Oh, they also passed a law that did away with the statute of limitations only for that kind of case. So they looked through the records and they found this incident. And they put it in all the newspapers, on television, clamored for his head. His mother read the newspaper and died of a heart attack right on the spot. Really. And so they got his head. What he did was wrong. But through all that, I remember wondering, where's the love that we talk about in the Catholic Church? Where is the merciful, charitable, forgiving love? Imagine if every time a husband or a wife was unfaithful, that the lawyers would go after you, it would end up in the media, they would clamor for your head, and you would lose your professional standing in whatever you did. Now, is that infidelity wrong? Yes, it's very wrong. Of course it is. We're not saying otherwise. But there has to be some place for mercy. Otherwise, we're a bunch of hypocrites and we stand for nothing. And if you want justice, you want to clamor for that? Be careful. What you better be clamoring for is mercy. I remember there was a joke, and I don't remember it exactly, but there were two old gals on an airplane, and they were kind of like past their prime, but they were still doing all they could to look good. And one of them said to the other one, says, Susie, it's just all downhill, you know. Everything is, you know, I'm getting old. I don't look as good as I used to do, and you know, I have wrinkles, and my hair is getting not like it used to be, and oh well, I have some pounds that I wish I didn't have, and he said, I mean, it's just not just. And her friend looked at her and said, honey, never mind justice, you better pray for mercy. Don't worry, God is a just God. As Jesus said, every penny will be paid. And certainly, if somebody breaks the law, they got to pay the price. I'm not against that. I'm not saying other than that. What I am saying, though, is for us as Catholics, have a merciful heart. Do not be too quick to beat people up and finish them off, no matter who they are. Lay person, religious, priest, be careful with that. You know, you can absolutely kill somebody with your tongue. The tongue is far mightier than the sword. You know, a word here or there, one way or the other, you can lift somebody up or destroy them utterly. We have that power, and we have to be careful. This is part of love. Jesus says, well, what merit is it if you only love those who love you? You know, we can extend that and say, well, what merit is there to just love somebody who's lovable? That's not Christian. You know, anybody can do that. Any pagan can love someone who's lovable, or that they're attracted to, or like-minded. Anybody can do that. Something else, though, to love somebody when you don't agree with them. That doesn't mean you have to agree with something that's wrong, but you have to love them. Now, think about this. Think about all these politicians we don't agree with. As despicable as some of them are, and they are, destroying our way of life as we know it, and they are, responsible for tens of millions of abortions, and they are. It is genocide in plain English, and they are responsible. Nonetheless, I may not like them, but I have to love them. Now, that's a hard saying. I have to love them. What does that mean? I have to pray for their conversion. I have to try to be civil to them. I have to hope for the best. Be a good example. Pray the rosary. Don't vote for them by any means, but, you know, that's not love. That's like contributing to their own demise. You know, that's like, I don't know, helping a thief to steal. You don't want to do that. But you've got to love them. Okay. Very basic. What is love for us? Love is the desire for the highest and best thing for the sake of the beloved. If I love you, and I do, I want you in heaven forever. Now, this is the simplest of the simple rocket science that we'll present this weekend. If I love you, if you love me, if we love each other, we have to desire that we get to heaven. But it's not enough. Then we have to be willing to do whatever it takes to get the beloved to heaven. Parents for your children, children for your parents, pastors for their people, people for their pastors. Here's the bottom line, heaven. Now, when I get there, and I hope I do, I hope every one of you is there. It will be a bad deal for me if you are not. I remember St. John Vianney, the patron saint of parish priests, rejoicing to be the brother of his people. I rejoice that I am your brother in Christ, in virtue of our baptism. So we're all baptized. We have the same Father in heaven, same Blessed Mother. So I rejoice in that reality. However, I am scared to death to be your pastor, because that carries with it unbelievable consequences. I wake up in the middle of the night. Last night, I knew last night by about 1 a.m. that some very good things were going to come from this conference because of the, let's just say, I became absolutely certain by about 1 a.m. of how much the devil hated my guts. Oh, it was an interesting night. I used to have that stuff all the time in the old days. Haven't had it for years very much. Last night, wow. Something was going to go on today. I knew that for sure. Listen, this is important. You will not go to heaven alone. I will not go to heaven alone. And I will not go to hell alone either, and neither will you. When we go, up or down, one way or the other, we will take a large number of people with us in virtue of the people that we impacted in virtue of our life, our Catholic and Christian life. Your children, your grandchildren, your co-workers. You don't have to go out and preach on a street corner. A life well lived is the most eloquent sermon there is. And every one of us is called to that. We are. You have to do it. This is what we're called to. That's real life. That's real love. I'll give you some examples. Well, I'll stick with St. John Vianney, as long as we mentioned him. He was not the most gifted person, academically speaking, when he went through, well, he didn't even really go to a seminary. He had a tutor and a very holy priest that helped him prepare. Well, he was finally ordained, And the bishop sent him to the worst parish in the diocese, in the town of Ars. And he said to the bishop, but bishop, there's no love of God in that town. And the bishop said, you will put some there. And St. John said, but bishop, there's no faith in that town. And the bishop said, well, you will put some there. And so he sent him off to the far end of the diocese, out to the worst place he had. Nobody went to Mass. Totally disinterested in religion. He went around to the farms, introduced themselves to the farmers. They were very coarse with him, very gruff, used bad language with him, dismissed him. So, he probably didn't like some of them, but he loved every one of them. And what did he do about it? He fasted, and he prayed before the Blessed Sacrament every night, on his knees, hour after hour after hour, praying and doing penance because he loved them. And he wanted them in heaven. So what do? Oh, I've got I imagine my mother, for instance. Now, I have often said I've never met anyone worse than me. In my confessional, when I heard confessions, long hours before, I never met anyone worse than me. No one ever had to be scared to go to confession to me. I would always tell them, wow, you lucked out. You really lucked out. You got me. That is easy. Man, you got it made now. Do you really imagine that I haven't heard whatever you did before? You think I haven't heard it? I probably did it, and then some. So why would you worry about that? You've got a son or a daughter. My mother prayed for me, the rosary, day in, day out, 10 years, 20 years. I imagine she got tired, worn out, disillusioned, discouraged. Then one day, my mother saw me drug addicted, homeless. My mom saw a SWAT team come and carry me away, complete with helicopter. She was there that day. She kept praying, and she suffered. I have a dim intimation in recent years of what a parent can suffer because of a child. I have a dim intimation of it because of a couple people close to me in my family. Only a parent knows what it's like to live in fear of that phone call in the middle of the night. And I know some of you know what I'm talking about. Well, I did for 10 years. I lived in fear of the phone call in the middle of the night from the sheriff's office, the hospital, the morgue, the drug overdose, the alcoholism. And what do you do about it? You do the same thing that St. John Vianney did, but you do it in your own way, in your own state in life. You pray. Grace is not cheap. The price of a soul is not light. It astounds me how much it costs sometimes. Pray and pray and pray some more. If you're able, fast or do some other penance. You know what the number one form of penance is in the church? According to the church's major document on penance, by Pope Paul VI. It's called penitentiary. It is to accept the trials and tribulations of your state in life. That's the number one form of penance according to the formal teaching of the church. So you're a mom. What's your best form of penance? To accept the difficulties, the trials, the tribulations that attend to your state in life. So it's not easy. You know, some of you, my office manager isn't with us here on this trip. She just had a baby recently, a week or so ago. Man, it's a lot of work. Holy mackerel. Like 20 hours a day? You get to sleep 15 minutes at a time? It's like the Special Forces Q course. Man, you know, Green Berets don't have anything on mothers. Oh, mom is tough. Absolutely. So the number one form of penance, and penance adds power to prayer. The number one form of penance is to accept those trials and tribulations that are just normal with your state in life. You know, Dad, you know, I can only imagine how difficult it must be for a lot of men today in this rather bad economy, and I think getting worse. I can only imagine what it must be like for a young father who maybe loses his job. He wants nothing more than to work and support his family, but he's having a hard time. His company may be cutting back on the payroll or whatever. I can't imagine the anxiety of wondering if I could feed my family. Unbelievable. Be strong. Offer it up. Like my grandmother used to say. You know, I wrote a 333-page doctoral thesis in dogmatic theology on the meaning of suffering in the teaching of Pope John Paul II. As I took 333 pages on that rather dense theological topic to express what my grandmother said in 3 words. Now you figure out who was smarter, her or me. Took me 330 pages, she said it in 3 words. Offer it up. Remember? In the old days how we used to say that? Offer it up. Well, those few words are indicative of the heart of our theology in the Catholic Church. And what it is, redemption theology. It's the essence of love. Real love. The love that we've been talking about here. Like, if I love you, I want you in heaven. But not just a desire for you to be in heaven. Action. Yes, I want you in heaven, and yes, I'm willing to do something about it, no matter how much it costs. And it will cost plenty. Offer it up. I remember, you know, my grandmother, I guess I'd never understood it when I was a boy, but I never forgot it either. You know, it would be a cold day in upstate New York. The snow would be pounding down, and maybe we got lucky and school was called off for the day. And she'd say something, okay, well, you got to do something though, so here, take out the garbage. But Grandma, it's a blizzard outside. Oh, offer it up. Oh, I ran out of milk or bread or eggs. Go up to the corner store and get me these things. But Grandma, it's 0. And there's 2 feet of snow. And it's blowing sideways. Offer it up. I heard that a million times. That expresses the heart of our theology, redemption theology. That's love. What are you willing to do to save a soul? Well, sure, your own, but we're Christians. We're baptized into Jesus. And what did he do? He laid down his life for his friends and his enemies. We have to have the same mentality. That's love. When you start to deal with the essence of authentic love, you must talk about sacrificial love. This is what separates the men from the boys, so to speak. You can talk about love until you're blue in the face. But as St. Teresa of Avila used to say, love is the cross, and the cross is love. And that's it. You love to the degree you are willing to sacrifice for the beloved. No more, no less. That's how much love you have. People get married. Everything is wonderful. The honeymoon is great. Then reality sets in. Right? I mean, I can imagine. Priests are kind of analogous to married people in that, as I mentioned before, we're espoused to the bride of Christ because Jesus is the high priest. There's only one priest. Jesus Christ is the high priest. All of us at baptism are incorporated into Christ. Then from out of the midst of the baptized, certain men are called to another sacrament, holy orders, and they become priests. But there's only one priest, and that's Jesus. And Jesus then works through the instrumentality of the ministerial priest. Jesus is the bridegroom, hence we are the bridegroom through him, with him, and in him. And who's the bride? The church. So when the priest is ordained, it's like his wedding day. I remember mine. I was ordained by Pope John Paul II on Trinity Sunday, 1991. My friend Father Tony Anderson, who's here today and who will celebrate Mass as the main celebrant later, we were ordained together at St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City. Oh, it was jam-packed. Wow, what a day. 62 of us, I believe it was, were ordained. And we processed in, and when I got to my place, you know, I looked right behind me. I was in kind of the last row, and I looked in. There was Mother Teresa. She could have touched me. She did later, in many ways. She was there flanked by two of her sisters. Two of the men in her congregation were being ordained. So she was right behind me. Pope John Paul II was in front of me. And I remember thinking, I'm in a pretty good spot. Right in between two saints. I had stayed up all night the night before with my superior, Father Jim Flanagan, who's having a rough time right now. I'd ask you to pray for him. He's a one great and holy man who lived all this that I'm talking about so perfectly. A guy who could never say no to anyone, who understood the sacrificial meaning of love, who wanted every one of us and wants every one of us to get to heaven and is willing to do something toward that end. We stayed up all night and prayed in the chapel next to the Vatican where we were staying. And all night we would pray the rosary, then he would tell me things like a father would tell his son. Very wise things all night long. We were there like 10 hours in that chapel. We didn't sleep at all that night. I have to say that I don't remember most of what he said, but I do remember one thing, and it must be the most important thing, because that's what I remember. He said, always come as a servant. Whether you're a mom, a dad, a priest, religious, anything. Always come as a servant. Jesus came to serve, not to be served. The Lord of Lords and the King of Kings came to serve, not to be served. Servants do hard things and dirty things. Servants do things that nobody else is willing to do. And that's what we have to do. Love is sacrifice. Yeah, at the beginning, it was great. Oh, I was ordained by a pope who will be, I'm sure, a canonized saint one day. We came processed out of the basilica, 4 choirs singing, people cheering. I floated out of there. And for months, I would wake up out of a dead sleep at night. And literally, I'm not saying this figuratively, literally, from my soul would be singing in disbelief, I'm a priest, I'm a priest. Thank God I'm a priest. I couldn't believe it, I was a priest, and I'll guarantee you most of heaven couldn't believe it either. But I was ecstatic. See, that was the honeymoon, right? Not so different, you know, husbands, wives, hey, your wedding day, it's fantastic. So it's kind of like that for priests too. Then time goes on, and you have to settle in to the routine of being a spouse, and then a mom or a dad, and you go to work, and you come home, and you do that every day, and it's a wonderful thing, and it is a blessing, and we thank God for it. But after a while, for most people, some of that idealized, romanticized, warm, fuzzy stuff isn't quite what it used to be. It's kind of like, oh, well, I told you I'd wake up in the middle of the night, you know, oh, praise the Lord, you know, thank God, I'm a priest, you know, I'm married to the bride of Christ, oh, the church, great, wow, wonderful. Then, you know, a year later or so, you wake up in the middle of the night, kind of look over and go, ah! What have I done? I work and slave for you all day long. I travel 2 million miles all over God's green earth. Try to preach the truth. And then some of you spit in my eye. Tired of it. Weary. I don't like this anymore. I'm sick of it. It used to be so warm and fuzzy. So many spiritual consolations. Why, I began to think I was a saint. I remember the 3rd or 4th year, I never had anything. I had trials, of course, and tribulations, ups and downs, but I never had anything other than acceptance and success by the good Catholic people. Now, some that weren't so great, in my estimation, hated my guts. They didn't like me at all. As a matter of fact, I've never been so conscious of being loved and hated as since I've been a priest. But that goes with the territory. That's okay. Nothing, that's fine. If everybody loved me, shoot me. Really. If everybody loved me, there would be something very wrong with me. If I was saying something that, you know, the 80% of the church that doesn't go to church, and they all liked it, if I was talking in a manner that most of Congress and the Senate thought I was just wonderful, please put me out of my misery. I must be doing something wrong. You can't do that. Love is sacrifice. Love is sacrifice. You love to the degree you're willing to sacrifice. No greater love hath a man or a woman, but that they lay down their life for their friends and their enemies. So, sometimes people don't fully appreciate you, Mom. Even your kids, maybe, on a given day. Dad, pastors, priests, some days are better than others. Some days you want to quit. Oh, some days are still warm and fuzzy, but a lot of days are tough. You will know how much love you have when you know how much you're willing to sacrifice. Parents sacrifice for each other, for their children. Priests have to sacrifice. You know, God sends us all kinds of trials as a gift.